All right. Hello, and welcome to Plugging Along, a stream dedicated to Lotro plugins. And I realize I say that all the time, but of course, Lotro is Lord of the Rings Online, just in case you clicked on the stream and don't know what's going on. So, a stream dedicated to Lord of the Rings Online plugins. Last time on Plugging Along, we continued work on the Minstrel Buff plugin to replace inefficient but pretty easy to understand code with hopefully more efficient but probably harder to understand code. Today we're going to pause our work to look at BuffBars, a completely different plugin. A community member, Egg Arthur, brought to my attention that with the recent increase in duration from 2 days to 14 days for the VIP subscriber buffs, the elapsed time can become too long for the time display. We're going to look at two ways to fix this. First, we'll duplicate the problem, and then we'll look at ways to fix this. So as always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. And in the meantime, I see there's a little bit of chat. Hello, Farrelton. I just realized I had not responded to a comment of yours on Lotro Interface. I think I hadn't subscribed to the BuffBars thread, but I feel like if someone comments on a patch or a plugin you release, you should just get an email automatically. But that may not be how it works. So I just respond to you today, but I'll probably respond to that on stream as well because I think it was an interesting question. Okay, so first of all, what is the problem? Well, the problem, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my plugin manager from the system menu and load BuffBars. Okay, so let's go ahead and move BuffBars to where it's a little bit more centrally located. And here we can see right now, my subscriber buffs is currently at 68 hours and counting. And what do we know? We know, let me bring up my calculator here. We know that if it can last for 14 days, that is going to be 336 hours. That sound right? 24 hours a day, 14 days. So we know that subscriber buffs can potentially last for 336 hours. Farrelton says, I'm allowed to pause on the optimization minstrel buff because they use BuffBars too. Yeah, BuffBars is actually one I don't use very much, but I'm aware that a lot of people do. So happy to kick back a little bit of improvement for a much wider applicable tool than minstrel buffs, which is pretty niche. Okay, so what do we have? We have a new possible maximum of 336 hours for subscriber buffs. Before it was 2 days, which of course is going to cap out at 48 hours. And really, 99 hours gets you past 4 days. And I don't know of any buff in game that lasted more than 4 days. In fact, 24, 96 hours, yeah. So I don't know of any buffs. This is probably the only buff that can last more than 4 days. And it's the only buff that I know of that can get into 3 digits for the hours column. Here we see seconds, minutes, and hours. And so I'm going to pull up the code, and hopefully we can throw some debug code in there to artificially inflate how long subscriber buffs is lasting, so we can see the problem. But first, it occurred to me, I want to make sure that the code that I'm going to modify locally is the same as what other people are already looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the Lotro interface website. Lotro interface, excellent. And I'm going to re-download my patch files and make sure I didn't do anything weird in the meantime. So list my interfaces. Okay, my patch onto a different patch, well, a correction of someone else's patch. And that patch fixed some issues with BuffBars. Cool. All right, so I'm going to download that. And now, actually, while that's downloading, what I was referring to before, Farrelton, I apologize, I'm probably messing that up. Farrelton asked, why don't you release a complete new version to make it easier for other games instead of making a fix for a patch for an old plugin. Just interested. Thanks for your time. That is an excellent question, and I don't have a good answer for that. My answer that I put on the thread there for all to see is I've been hesitant to be like, this is mine now, to what is, frankly, a very popular plugin. Let's just open up BuffBars here for a moment. We can scroll down and see that BuffBars has been downloaded 600 and almost 50,000 times, 2/3 times. Now, if you have downloaded once each of these versions, that will count as a separate instance. That's not the number of users. But if we can guesstimate that there's been maybe 20 releases, we can divide that number by 20, sure. And we still have hundreds and, tens of thousands of users. And so I've been a little bit hesitant to be like, this is mine now, just because I have made a small tweak to what is otherwise a very popular and usable plugin. I don't know if that's the right approach, but that's where we're at. Like, there's been 3,200 downloads of this patch of a patch. There's been 2/3 downloads of this plugin, right? Like, the plugin feels predominant in that scenario. And I don't use BuffBars, so I'm not necessarily the right person to be maintaining it anyway, because I don't use it in my day-to-day life. The minstrel buffs, I have a strong thought that I might be a reasonable person to take it over if anyone were, because I do use it every time I play. Okay, I don't play every day, but every time I'm playing, I will use minstrel buffs, 95% of the time. And so that is something I'm deeply invested in. BuffBars, I'm happy to make it better if I can, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to be playing with it. And I'm not going to be seeing it, and I'm not going to be in it and thinking of really cool things. Oh, what if it did this? What if it did that? So if someone were to take over BuffBars, I don't think it's going to be me. I'm happy to work with someone else if they want to and contribute my changes and so on. So those are my thoughts on that subject. Frothin says, thanks for the answer. I appreciate it. Absolutely. And, I could have a change of heart or something, I suppose, but that's where I'm at right now. Unfortunately, we don't have a good infrastructure that I know of for installing a plugin and then a patch and then a patch of that patch. And so it does make it a little bit harder, and that is unfortunate. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and extract this zip file, just using the built-in Windows tool. And we're going to go ahead and do a comparison. I like using Beyond Compare, but there are many tools out there. And we're going to come on in here to Documents, Lord of the Rings Online, Plugins, and we're going to go ahead and compare those two folders and see, have I done anything weird? Oh, interesting. So in that, I had seen that before, and I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be there. All right, so there is a, let's see, show differences, but no orphans. Okay, no differences. There's so many different comparison options here. Here I just said, don't show me files that exist in one but not the other. I only care about files that are in both that are different. And in fact, we can kind of see what's going on here. So let's see, no orphans. So these are the only files that exist in both, and we can see that they're identical now. I had accidentally deleted this plugin compendium file. It's back. Cool. Nice little catch there. Okay, so we're in a good starting place since it's been months since I last looked at this. Let's see. When did I upload? November. That's exciting. Okay. Oh, right, I remember. I was trying to get it so that this could be installed using plugin compendium. I never got it to work correctly. So it's quite possible a plugin compendium file is not appropriate here. Hello, kin person. Okay, cool. Then we can go ahead and get started on this. So the first thing is, oh, hello, little icon. Can I move you? I'd like to move you. The first thing is I have only gotten my subscriber buffs about 5 days ago in game. So we're going to want to dig into the code and figure out how do we fake this out. And the first thing I do when I start looking at this kind of thing is say, okay, there's an options panel, and that options panel has various things, including an effects window. And we can double check that this is what we're talking about by renaming BuffBars 2. Why not? And we'll go ahead and accept that change. Oh, that's fun. It just moved to a different location. Okay, and we can see the name of it is BuffBars 2. So this is what we're looking at in the options effects window. This must be an effects window. Cool. That kind of narrows our search in the code, and we can go ahead and pull up the code and start trying to figure out where this, what do we need to change here? What are we doing? Okay, so I've gone ahead and created a Visual Studio Code workspace. Visual Studio Code is a free tool you can download, and I do highly recommend the Lotro API extension. Now I can see I'm an update or two behind. My apologies, Lunar Water. But I'm definitely not going to do an update in the middle of a stream. That's just asking for trouble. So I'll make a note to update that later. Update Lotro API extension. Cool. Okay. So what do we have here? We have BuffBars, UI, and utils. Let's pop up in BuffBars and take a look at what we see. Okay, we can see that there's a class effect window that I'm going to hope corresponds to the effects window thing that we're configuring. And this is just this is an exploration of the code that I am not at all familiar with. Last time I looked at this was like half a year ago, so I effectively remember none of it. Okay, so effect window is going to be a UI.window. Cool. What else do we see in the text here? So debuff, so buff bar, so stuff. Okay, we're showing stuff. Okay. What happens if one of these is true? Okay. Then we have an effects list of a given type. We pass in the settings object so it can construct itself. Awesome, awesome, awesome. What is an effect list? Looks like, oh, yep, we have effect list.lua. And I'm going to come in here and hope that this represents a list of stuff that has these, right? So I'm hoping, oops. I'm hoping an effect list. In fact, let me move this effect list thing so it's a little bit more visible even with the code window. Okay, so that's what I'm hoping is that's an effects window and it contains an effect list. Okay, if that's true, then it's a list box. Cool. And what do we have? We're inserting stuff and things. Oh, that's triggers. Oh, interesting. Okay, what else do we have? We have a list of effects, and we are getting an effect. Awesome. And we're calling effects added. All right, what does that do? We're creating an effect item. Okay. And that effect item is going to do stuff and things. Okay, so current theory, this is an effect window, which contains an effect list populated by effect items. Great. Let's go check out an effect item. Okay, we have effect item.lua with a few possible syntax issues, but we're going to ignore those for right now. Okay, an interesting thing I'm seeing up here at the top, we'll put a pin in it, is it looks like for various fonts, we have various widths for how wide should a timer be for a given font. And that's interesting. That suggests that, yes, okay, we have 10 through 23 as possible font selections. Let me pull this up so it's a little bit more visible. And we have here 10 to 23. So that seems to be how they're going to handle variable font sizes. Cool, okay. And then what do we have? We have a constructor, awesome. We have a destructor, fun. We have set effect, get effect, update. Okay, update is a strong contender for a place that we can play around with stuff. We have flash. I'm guessing that makes it flash. See, I have to guess. I just don't play with this thing very often. But I'm guessing that makes it go blinky to blink to show you that it's almost out or something. And then we have layout. Where we're setting a bunch of sizes and positions. That might be useful to think about later. Okay. Oh, cool. So we're back at the update function. And in the update function, we do things based on if self.duration is bigger than, what is that, 1 day? Number of seconds. Okay, cool. Otherwise, if it's less than, all right, been a while since I've looked at time. 60 times 60 times 24. Okay, yeah, 1 day's worth of seconds. Not counting, leap seconds. Okay, either it's longer than a day or it's a day or less. Cool. What is self? Self is an effect item. Okay, so for testing purposes, to reproduce the thing that we're looking for, we want subscriber buffs to have a longer duration. What are we doing? Set text time, elapsed time equals game time. I guess we want elapsed time. Yeah, let's give that a try. Elapsed time if, then elapsed time equals elapsed time plus, okay, we want it to have at least 3 hour digits. I mean, that's pretty easy. If it's 100 hours, then it is 6,000 minutes. It is 360,000 seconds. So we can just add 360,000 seconds and guarantee that our elapsed time is at least 3 digits worth of hours. Cool. Okay. For some reason, 3 question marks seems to be a syntax error. Okay, what do we do? We want something to be equals to subscriber buffs. But how do we get a name out of this? Excellent question. So, the constructor gets an effect. And it looks like that's either going to be a combat analysis effect display or an effect display. That's exciting. Okay. Self.effect. Let's see what we have here. Get. Right, because an effect display has an effect. And from that we can get a name. Okay. So this might give us the ability to say, if we're talking about a subscriber buff, pretend it has 100 hours longer on the timer. Knight Azia says, hi, how are you? I am doing very well. How about you? Welcome to Plugging Along, where we talk about Lord of the Rings Online plugins and how to write them. Or in this case, how to update one to take into account subscriber buffs being able to go for more than 4 days long. Okay, so we made a little bit of a change here to pretend like subscriber buffs has lasted longer. So let's go ahead and unload and reload and see what happens. Perfect. So it's over on the edge of my screen, but hopefully you can see that now subscriber buffs, and we're going to move that on back here, maybe more to the, up to the top, center top here. We can see subscriber buffs. I have faked it out to say it's been live for 168 hours. And we can see that the default behavior of a label is that if the text is too wide, then a character will wrap on to the next line. And that's what's happening here. And my computer's making funny noises. And that's what's happening here, is the second digit for seconds is wrapping onto the next line, which is not great. But I mean, it's readable, obviously. You can tell what's going on. But we would like this to all be in one line. Cool. So we've been able to reproduce the problem. Oh. And Othello points out, I could just go ahead and increase the font size. You know, that's an excellent point. Even more excellent if my computer stopped making crackling noises. That's exciting. Let's go into effects window and see what happens when we blow up the font size. All right. Oh, and looks like I have to accept. Oh, that's exciting. And then it moved. Huh. All right. All right. Let's go ahead and bump it up to 16. Fun. Oh, what's that? 23. Okay. I'm wondering, is it possible to make these things wider? Let's see. How do you make an effects window wider? Okay, scrolling on down. Width. Oh, there we go. It was right below where I was. All right, let's go ahead and just bump this thing up to, say, 200, well, 300. Give ourselves plenty of room. Oh, lovely. Oh, Arthur echoes. Scroll down. There's a width slider. I was mentally not expecting a slider, and so I was just like skipping right over those elements. Okay, now that's interesting. Oh, the height is also a little bit lower. Let's go ahead and bump the height up. Yeah, that's going to let us see that second ticking on through there. Oh, that's funny. I hadn't noticed it when it was smaller, but you can see how out of sync the second increments are for each of those four things. I wonder if that's a plugin issue or if the game actually has those ticking at different rates. Not different rates, but at different times, I should say. And of course, none of these actually have timers that you can see. Oh, that one does. Okay. So we have a time that is too wide for the text field that contains it, and that causes it to wrap. So two thoughts immediately come to mind when I look at this. Is either we can make the text area wider, or we can fill it with less text. Personally, Ghostling says, want to increase the size of all UI. It's true. That is a known desire of both the community and the developers of the game, of which I am not. Just in case you did not know, I am not an SSG employee. I'm just very fond of the plugins available for Lord of the Rings Online. So while it is true that you can do things like increase the size of text in your chat window or your quest window, like this, and it is true that you can increase the size of many UI elements. So if we go to System Options, you can go to UI Settings and just use this plus button right here, just make everything bigger. You can do these things. Actually, layout load. Okay, we'll put all those back. You can do these, but ultimately, I hear it's not a very satisfactory result on, say, a 4K monitor, where, keep in mind, this game was designed when 1K monitors did not exist. Like 15 years ago, like the standard monitor I went to school was like 1600 by 1200. So I guess technically in that sense, it was 1K, but not in the way that we mean right now. So 1K was the standard. maybe, or high end when the design specs for this game were being written. In 2K, 4K, these were not things. Ghostling is talking about bags. Now that's an interesting point. I often use a plugin for my bags. First of all, I combine them all into a single bag. Just you can do that inherently as part of the game. But I use Prime bags, or the customized version that I've been playing around with. And I would suspect, though I don't know for sure, I would suspect that it is possible for a plugin to be bigger, to show the bag bigger than default. And that's actually a really interesting question. I'm gonna write that down. Can Prime bags be embiggened via scaling? So, one of the side effects of the game being designed a long time ago, we are celebrating the 15th anniversary of Lord of the Rings Online this month, is that these icons here are just 32 by 32 pixels, I believe. And you can make them look bigger, but it just sort of scales up a thing that exists. It scales up that 32 pixels, makes it pretty pixelated looking, but it does make it bigger in that way. Well, I do hope any of what I said was helpful there, Ghostling. Good luck. Yeah, 2.5K resolution. That's going to be tricky. Yeah, absolutely. The bag currently, the in-game UI doesn't really have a scaling mechanism. I like using Prime bags just because it fits my approach better, but the all-in-one bag makes it a little bit easier as well for me. Okay, so 2 approaches. Make the space where this text is going a little bit wider. Obviously, we're only shy by 1 second with worth, and so maybe we can just bump it up by a little bit for each of those fonts. And also, we could just stick less stuff there, right? Like, just as an experiment, if elapsed time is greater than 360,000, then we could just say self timer set text. It looks like they're doing very long, right? If we do that, if we come back in to our plugin manager and unload and reload, oh, very long was too long. Okay. How many characters do we have? We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so whatever message we want, it has to be less than 8 characters. All right, we'll just call it long. Cool, right? Like, there's nothing that stops us from just being like a long time. But that's sort of the second approach, is put less stuff there. Either because if something has lasted for 4 days, we probably don't care about the seconds. We could just do hours and minutes, or we could just approximate however many number of days, something. Oh, Saren says good afternoon, or afternoon. Good afternoon to you as well. Welcome to the stream. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and undo that little mock change that we had there and come back to the idea. Now, we can see in this code that we're talking about a self.timer set text. And we can see timer is a label, so set text is just setting those characters. So we can ask ourselves, where does self.timer get how wide it is? And we can set that in 2 different ways. We can say set width, and we can use the set size function, oh, there we go, to pass both a width and a height. Okay, so this is the layout function. I'm not sure when it is called, but self.timer, we're going to set size to timer width and height. Cool. What's that about? Okay. Timer width is effect item dot timer widths with the setting of font. Okay, what is timer widths? Oh, yes. So we put a pin in this before. This is where you have a fixed width for every font size. So someone went through and figured out, okay, how big do I want this to be at various font sizes? And it would be reasonable to ask, could we bump this up to, say, 91? Because we're on font size 23, I believe. Yes, we are. All right. So unload, load. Okay, that didn't work. We can do a bit of a binary search here, or at least jump up in increments. So we were at 90. Let's check 95. Nope, not enough. Okay, let's check 100. Nope, not. Oh. Okay, that is dependent on which characters are being shown. That is awesomely terrible. But it means we're close. So let's try 101. Give it an extra pixel. Now we can see that is causing us to want this to be a little bit wider. So let's go ahead and slide this up to 350. Well, close enough to it. Accept that. Okay. So what do we see? We see it seems to be staying on one line with or without a 0 in there. But let's just go ahead and take a look here. Okay, that seems pretty consistent. Like Arthur says, some of these are unstable. They wrap on some updates, but not others. Yeah, just like what we're noticing, different... sorry, let me back up. Fonts can be monospaced or what's the other one? Variable spaced? Every digit can take the same width or can be slightly wider or less wide. So it would be reasonable to say, what does it look like with, say, a bunch of 8s, typically the widest character? Well, that's a good question. And we could just say, okay, what does 888 hours look like? So minutes and seconds. Is that right? Yeah, that's probably right. Okay. Let's come back down here and play around with 8s. Oh, here we go. If it's subscriber buffs, then elapsed time equals 888 times 60 times 60 plus, what's another wide one? Well, how about 3? 38 times 60. Okay, let's just set the value to something that we think is going to be kind of wide. It's flashing. Oh, it's flashing because it should be expired. That's just rough on the eyes, isn't it? Okay, never mind. That was a terrible idea. Okay, 388 is also not good. Hello, Brenna. What is 388? Oh, okay, 16. Okay, we'll just do 288 then. Oh, so looks like someone has been doing the bashing in the Ale Hall. Ghostling says, now the blue strip is not reduced according to time. It should be. Although, I believe it would be if I were not playing around with this the way I am. If things were expiring normally. And we saw that before, I think. So if I just comment this out, you can comment align with the double hyphen. Let's see, unload, bring that back. Well, I don't have an answer for you. It's only reducing if you have a countdown, otherwise it stays blue, it says for a thin. Excellent, and that is a point where I am glad that someone who uses this is watching. So if I were to do a major, here we go. We can see war speech is counting down from, I believe it's 6 seconds to start. and now it goes. I think, wait a second. That makes war speech? What an interesting edge case. If you convert Major Ballad into a healing only, it still increases your tactical damage. Alright. Okay. Now, of course, we see in bolding finish here, the name is too long, and it is wrapping. I think that's probably a little bit more reasonable. Either you care about that enough to change the width, or you just aren't worried about it wrapping like that. We'll go ahead and bump up the width so it wraps very nicely. Okay. In fact, okay, you've got me curious. If timer, I'm curious how much space timer is actually taking up. So I'm going to go ahead and set the background color to it takes a color. So UI.color, maybe? There we go. And we'll just change it to, I don't know, purple. There we go. Okay, so we can see just how big the timer box is being there. Oh, and we can see my subscriber buffs. With all my editing, I took out the thing that was making it take longer. Agatha says, you can also remove the icon to get back more space. Well, I'm not going to worry about that so much because I imagine everyone gets to kind of configure this to be exactly what they want it to look like. For me, the icon would be very useful if I were to use this, I think. That way I could just glance and see the thing instead of having to read the text. But I was curious, where is the label? And we can see it looks like they have a little bit of a margin on the right. So the white text has that blue background around it instead of just hitting exactly on the right. I think that's a great approach. And we can see that we do not have a lot of wiggle room here for the width of that timer. What on earth is going on here? Oh. Hello, Elton. So I would actually say if I were going to increase the number of pixels here, let's go ahead and give it an extra pixel or two. Because that's not a lot of wiggle room in case some of the digits are a little bit wider than others. Sorry, I'm leaning over because I want to actually see the number of pixels here. That gives it some extra space. We could be really conservative and give it like 2 extra pixels. And we can see how much more wiggle room there is on the left there. Farathan says the icon helps me to identify the skill, otherwise I would be lost. Yeah, I'm with you on that. If I had BuffBars configured to look for like a couple of specific things and put them in a specific order for me, maybe I could do without the icon. Like if I was only looking for war speech, okay. Otherwise, yeah. And where is hustle coming from? What is hustle? Why do I keep seeing that? Is that just something we get in the neighborhood? All right. Well, when in doubt, I'll just go to the wiki. Oh, like Arthur says, hustle usually comes from an equipped item. I bet I put on something from Darnargabood that gives hustle. Yeah, it'd be appropriate if it was shoes. Yep, there it is. 5% out of combat run speed. Okay, that was driving me bonkers. Thank you. Okay, so this is 101 was kind of the minimum we needed to get it to stop wrapping every so once in a while. So 103 feels like, hey, we've given it a couple extra pixels just in case we missed a digit combination that is, where'd it go? Just in case we missed a digit combination that is just bonkers. Okay. Well, I mean, we could go ahead and just do that for each of these font sizes then. So if we came on in and bumped this down to 22 pixels, we can see we have the problem again. And we can just start going. So I'm going to make a note here that it was 82. And let's just bump it up by 5. 87. Unload, reload. Now, other thing we could do would be to just, hey, how many pixels are this thing? So we could use our snip tool. And we could go ahead and do a new rectangular snip. We could take that into even a tool like MS Paint. And we can blow this up and say, hey, how wide are you? Just out of curiosity, asking for a friend. And we can see it's about 11 if you include the shading. I don't know if we need to include the shading around it, but absolutely minimum, it is 10 wide. But you can imagine that there's going to be some spacing between things. In fact, if we were to do this a little bit more sensibly, we could go ahead and take a snip of the minutes. Come on in here. I would say Alham is working on their social deeds. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, as one does. When emotes at window. Okay, so we can see this 3, which is about as wide as our digits are going to get, it looks like, is taking 11. Okay, so that was 82, so we probably need that to be at least 93. And if we want to be generous, we'll say 95. Give us the extra 2 pixels. And then we unload, we reload, and hooray, it works. And we could just go down the line here. Now, the amount we need to increase by is going to be different for each font size because the number of pixels those things take is going to be different. But I think that would be, a reasonable approach, if you liked that kind of thing, would be to just go ahead and take a little screenshot or a little screen snip. Measure it up and say, oh, that's 0. That's impressive. That's also 11. Okay. So if we go ahead and add 13, I've opened the wrong window. So we go ahead and add 13. That's going to be a 95 here. And we can test that. Unload, reload. Little Redhead in chat says, I love that emoting at named NPCs advances social deeds. Yeah, and if you didn't know that, social deeds are hidden deeds in Lord of the Rings Online, which reward you for doing emotes at NPCs or other players doing emotes to you. So for instance, if I go into Race and Social and I come down here and I look for, let's just say Beloved. So, I don't actually remember which one this is. But Beloved requires you, someone to have done / let's just say hug. I don't remember what the actual mode is, 100 times, but you can only advance it 5 times a day, for instance. So that would take 20 days of doing that, or of you doing it to another NPC. So I do not believe there's currently any plugins that try to track that information for you. I've thought about it. I have really thought about trying to track incoming and outgoing hugs and try to figure out if that outgoing hug was going to a player or to an NPC, to figure out if it's counting for you or counting for them. It's one of those things where I think it'd be useful, but not just quite not useful enough for me, right? Like I just have reminders and I do the things using Social Guy, a different plugin. I don't think it's on the list there, but the Social Guy plugin, you can just click the buttons in order. You don't have to remember them. And then, after 20 or 40 days, it's all done, and then I stopped thinking about it for that main character. But I think it could be an interesting plugin experiment if anyone's looking for an idea for the next big plugin. All right, let's go ahead, and we checked on 20. 20 looks good. We'll just keep on going down the list here. So next one is 18. We resize that. And again, we could do this by trial and error, but I think it's reasonable to go ahead and just come in and get a screenshot that lets us see how many pixels a character takes in this font. And then we can select this. We can say, okay, now we're down to 10 pixels wide. So we're just going to go ahead and do 10 pixels plus 2 for wiggle room. So that would be 84, and now that's 86. Cool. In fact, we can make little notes. Done. So I remember which ones I've done for now, and we'll clean that up before we actually commit this into a source repository. Okay, the next one, let's go ahead and test this, but I'm feeling pretty good about this process. It seems nice and repeatable. Awesome. We'll come on into the effects window, and we'll knock it down to 16 points. Awesome. Okay, so we use our snipping tool. We'll grab a new snip. My goodness. All right, we come into MS Paint and we go ahead and paste that in. We find a nice wide digit, like number 6 is good. We can see that one's 8 wide. What about this 9? Also 8. And what about the 8? Also 8. So we can go ahead and follow our formula, and that would be 68. But we can go ahead and just do 70. And let's come back in, unload, reload, and that looks like a healthy margin there, but then I see the 1 like shift over for some of the numbers. Which number is that? 4? Is 4 our wide one? Oh my goodness. I can do 4. Hang on. All right, where did we go? Okay, so we want elapsed time. Let's do elapsed time equals, how much is 444 hours? That's probably too much. Yeah, it is. So let's do 14 days is 336. All right. So 44, we can just 244 hours plus 44 minutes plus 44 seconds. And that, if 4 is the wide character in this font, then that makes this as wide as possible, except I've messed something up. How have I messed that up? Now let's do some parentheses. Oh, of course. I did a times 60 at the very end. That's too many minutes. Try that again. There we go. Okay, so that's very stable, and we can see we have enough pixels for that. Okay. Well, let's keep going. That was font 16, I believe. We'll come on in here. And yep, font 16. All right, so let's knock it on down to 14. Okay, and then we can do the exact same process. Take a rectangular snip, bring it into MS Paint, and then just use the selection to select the digit. And when you're doing a selection, at the very bottom, you can see how wide and tall it is. So we can see this is 8 by 11 currently. And that tells us that we have 8 pixels wide Cool. If we want that little bit of margin of error, we can go ahead and add 10. So that'll take 58 to 68. We'll go ahead and test that. Bring it back in. And it all fits. Excellent. Let's go ahead and knock it down to 12. Do it all over again. I'll do a new step. Now, normally I would be developing with multiple monitors, and so a lot of my code and my MS Paint and whatnot would not be on top of Lord of the Rings Online. But since we're just streaming with a single composite monitor today, we're doing a little bit more flipping in the Z order than I would normally do during development. Not to say you can't develop on a single monitor system, you absolutely can, but I do like the double monitor when possible. All right, we can see in this font, the character is 7 wide. Now, if we want to be snazzy, we might actually take into account what we're putting here and actually have a function that says how many digits wide do you want it to be, how many colons do you want it to be, and do some measurements so that we could just say, oh, if we want to support an extra digit, okay, that's a 1 character change. That feels a little overkill. Part of me is a little tempted to see what that would look like, just because, well, not specifically useful here, could that be more useful elsewhere? Anyway, this goes to 59. And let's go ahead and unload and load while I continue to ponder what that would mean. I'm going to finish what we're doing here because we're almost done. Almost done. I don't want to get derailed. We're going to go down to 10-point font. Awesome. We're going to go ahead and take a final snip here for this process. And we can, that is so small. Kudos to you if you use this. But my goodness. Like the 4 is merging into the 2 there. Okay, I'm going to be generous and say that is 5 wide. 6 wide. Okay, well, we'll say 6. Although, yeah, it definitely looks like the 4 is starting to encroach on the 2 there. And if that's the case, we're going to come on into here. And 6, we'll go ahead and add the extra 8. And that puts us at 48. Now, that might be a lot of overkill. There's a lot of wiggle room for this particular font. Yeah. Yeah, that seems like more than we need. Let's go ahead and knock it down to, say, 46 and see what that looks like. Oh, still plenty of room. So this is where my instinct to write a function is running up against the reality is fonts are hard. Knowing how much space a font is going to take is hard, even if you have specific predictable things like we're only putting 0 through 9 and colons. But it's not going to stop me from trying it just once. So let's go ahead and knock this up to the big one, 23. And from here, we're going to go ahead and take a new snip. And we're going to use this to check my assumptions. So my assumption is a digit takes 12 width. And so if you want to support 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, you need 7 times 12. So it should be at least 7 times 12 plus. And then we want to come on back to the colons and ask it, how much of this space is for numbers versus the colon? And I want to say all of it is for the colon because the numbers are up against each other for the most part. So we're going to attribute all of this to the colon, and that is 9 wide. So plus 9 times 2. And if we just load up a trusty calculator so we don't mess up mental math on the stream, we have 84 plus 18, 102, which is fantastic because the actual number we came up with is 103, and that had a little wiggle room in there. So that suggests we could maybe, uh, maybe set a number width, minimum or maximum number width, and colon width for each of these fonts, and have a function just generate this and have it be a lot more readable. I think that's more changes and frivolous changes. Like, this is just a fun exercise at this point, right? I think it's more changes than this warrants, but it's where my mind goes. When I see this, what I see is, wow, that's just going to be a nightmare to fix should we ever need another digit or whatever. But the reality is this plugin's been around for a while. The first release was in 2010. So this plugin's been around for 12 years. And this is quite possibly the first time in 12 years that we've needed to add an extra digit's width to accommodate 3-digit hours. And I can't imagine ever needing a 4-digit hour. What would that even be? Right? Like 4 digits minimum. So we're talking 1,000 hours. So that's a thing that lasts for over a month, which is longer than the servers stay up. Like, normally they are power cycled, or the software is brought down and then back up. It's like nothing can last that long because they're going to have maintenance sooner than that. And if not for the game, then the operating system itself. So like, we're never going to need another digit. Asterisk, right? Like, probably. So it'd be a fun exercise. I think it'd be not necessary, but it's where my mind goes is these numbers themselves are pretty magic numbery, right? They just happen to be the number of pixels we need, as opposed to something a little bit more, even if it was just what we just had, right? Like 8 times whatever. And let me actually, like, you can do arithmetic when you're doing these things. So we could have said 7 times 12 plus 9 times 2. In fact, we could even have defined local number of colons. And I've listened to enough Britishy YouTuber type people pronounce that as colon, and it just stuck in my head, and it's not what I'm used to. And so if I say colon instead of colon, then that's where that's coming from. So equals 2 local number of digits equals 7. And then we could start substituting that in, right? So we could have 9 times number of colons. Little Redhead in chat says, just don't start saying Lotro. There are a number of streamers who pronounce the acronym LOTRO Lotro, and there's a number that pronounce it Lotro. And I don't think there's any like official canonical thing. It's an acronym, right? Like, you do what you will. But in this household, we are very firmly in the Lotro is correct camp. And so whenever we hear someone pronounce it Lotro, it's not wrong, but it's a little bit jarring, right? It's like hearing tomato versus tomato. It's the other way of saying it, and it sounds different, is what it sounds. So I'd be tempted to construct these initializations with something a little bit more. So 12 times number of digits plus 9 times number of colons instead of 103. In this case, that gets you to 102. And so at least you know what these numbers are, what they represent, why they're here, and you could say, oh, if I want to add an extra pixel per digit, I can do that pretty easily. Or if I wanted to add an extra digit, I could do that pretty easily. Like I said, this is overkill. So we're gonna call it 103 and be done. But that's where my mind wanders, because just looking at these numbers, it's kind of inscrutable where they come from, and it's kind of inscrutable why they are there. Was the intent to have any margin for error? Was the intent to have extra space at the front and beginning, or was it to try to make it as tight as possible? And there's no intent in this number. 95 doesn't give us an intent, it just gives us a number of pixels. Well. As it turns out, that was the right thing for them to do, because they are not fixing it. So they didn't save themselves any effort. But you never know. You might be fixing it in the future, so you can be kind to yourself. Okay, so we have gone through each of the font sizes, and there's, I don't know, like 10 of them maybe? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 of them. So we've gone through the 8 font sizes and added enough pixels for each one of them that even if your buff lasts longer than 199 hours, that it doesn't wrap. But I'll tell you, I'm not especially fond of this, because notice what we see when we change the back color here is that every label is the exact same width. Now, this is actually something that if we had that sense of how many pixels do we expect this to take, we could actually have a function that says, oh, we have something that is only minutes and seconds. That text field does not need to be this wide. In fact, emboldening finish here is a really good example. It's only 5 digits and 1 colon wide. We don't need the space for the other 3 digits and 1 colon. And if I were to knock down this width by enough, just a little bit more, there we go. We can see there's plenty of space. And this would be a really frustrating thing as a user, right? Like, subscriber buffs is causing the entire column to consume a lot of space. And that's frustrating. But it's simple, right? It's easy. The harder solution would be to, every time this number changes, say how many digits do we need, and then resize the text field based off of that. But that sounds annoying. Farrelton asks, is it possible to cut off the skill names instead of a line break? Perhaps add some points at the end. Resonance to resona ... for really long skill names. This is an excellent question, and it comes down to the fundamental problem, which is it is very difficult to know how wide or how tall a specific piece of text is when rendered in an arbitrary font, right? Now, there are tricks you can play in Lotro to determine just how wide or how tall you need a text box to be. Generally, it involves slapping a scroll bar on there and then resizing the box wide or tall until the scroll bar is undrawn because it isn't needed, and then you use that to say, oh, okay, so we actually need 73 pixels because that's when the scroll bar disappears, and then you get rid of the scroll bar, or you do it in a temporary label, right? Like that's the trick in game to do this. But I wouldn't necessarily want to inflict that. Now, the other thing is, there's nothing that says we. Oh, hang on. I'm gonna go back to the documentation because I am curious about label. Is there a way to turn off wrapping? No. Single, multi-line. Awesome. What happens if we just say is multi-line is false? Self.timer set multi-line false. Let's do it. Nope. It is not actually multi-line. It is just wrapped. Great. Farthon says, thanks for the explanation for you to get done. No, it's not a bad idea. It is just like we don't have a good way to say, make this label as big as it needs to be to hold the thing. That's not a built-in functionality of labels. A label will wrap text if it needs to, and you can exploit that to kind of figure out how wide you need the thing to be. But you can't just say, hey, please make yourself however wide did you need to be to fit the thing. Now, that being said, what if the effect size. Let's see, timer. Okay, where is timer? Name. What if we just don't bother with the timer width? Like run into it. Okay. Now, for that, we would want to make sure that self.name has a higher z order than self.timer. Now you can do that, I think you can implicitly do that by creating them in the opposite order, or you can just set the z order. In fact, we're already setting the z order. Let's knock that up one. I'm not sure why we're setting a z order, but we are. And here we can see, hey, why is wrapping to the next line inherently better than just having the text run into each other? You can make the thing wider. So for anyone who uses this, I'm now curious. Is this a better solution? Like, let's knock this down to 325 and see what happens. Is it a better solution to just have the text run into the timer, and that's a sign that, hey, you should make this thing wider? I'm guessing the answer is no, because the timer is the important thing. But I'm curious, like, how much of an obscenity is this? Or an abomination, if you're a Lilo and Stitch fan. Rathan says, no. Okay, fair enough. Well, I have no problem with being overridden on that. I have no particular opinions on that. Okay, so new question. What if it was just truncated because it was underneath the timer control? Like this, in this case. In bolding and finish tier whatever, it's underneath the timer, as opposed to wrapping to a new line. This is kind of the poor man's version of the truncation that Farathan was asking about before, right? We're not doing a ... We're just, whoops, the timer's on top of it. Farathan says that's better. Excellent. Well, if Edgar Arthur, if you're still around, I'm curious what you think about us just not caring that the text runs underneath the timer as an alternative to the text wrapping if it's too long. And let me pull the wrapping version back up here. That would be this one. Okay, here's the wrapping version. Farathan says, asks, is it possible to auto-adjust the height if there is a line break? When you say line break, do you mean a wrapping because the text is too long to fit in the width? Or are there actual skills that have a line break in them? Farathan says, sorry for disturbing you. That's what I'm here for. I'm totally happy to have as much of a dialogue as this asynchronous method allows us to have, especially for a plugin that I am just I'm poking at it, but I don't grok it. I don't fundamentally understand it in a way that people who are using it all the time. Okay, so you said yes, but sorry. For yes, you're talking about wrapping like this? The answer is, it is possible to, in an arbitrary case, we could slap a scroll bar on here. The scroll bar would detect that it needs to be visible in order to for you to see all of the content, and we could gradually increase the height of the thing until the scroll bar disappears, and then we could say, okay, that is the auto height. Edgar Arthur points out users can control this. That's a good point, Edgar Arthur. Users can come in here and say, I just want the height to be 44. And then if you are setting it up so it's narrow enough that you are wrapping a bunch of things, you can set it up so it's tall enough so that doesn't matter. Now, maybe you're like, oh, I don't care if stuff wraps, and you just cut it off completely like this. That's totally a possibility. And in that case, it kind of emulates what we were doing before, which is to say, don't worry about any text that would go underneath the timer, like this one. And that's, you know, I don't know that that's a better option than what the community currently has, which is either wrapping but just hide it versus wrapping and see a part of it versus like I feel like there's more options with what we currently have, but where the default is kind of uglier, whereas this it just scrolls off, and maybe that's just terrible for everyone. I don't know. I don't think I'll be committing that particular change, but it's fun to play around with what options do we have. Or what easy options do we have? So, okay. We have gone through, and I have gone off on a tangent about how I hate all this wasted horizontal space because we're using a single width for every timer label instead of customizing the label width based off of the duration stored in there. But this has the advantage of always being correct if somewhat wasteful. I mean, the worst case is you have a timer that has only seconds and you're wasting 3/4 of the space, but you're never wasting, more than a certain amount of space. This is kind of like memory allocation where you just double the previous allocation kind of thing. Sure, you might waste space, but never more than twice as much as you... Anyway, that's a whole other thing. So yes, this can be wasteful. As we're seeing here, there's a lot of empty purple space, but the average case is not going to be that bad. So, and also, how on earth long does emboldening finish last? Oh, until I use a coda. Nice. All right. Okay. At plus, this is the exact same design as we had before. It just, I object to it because the subscriber buffs is one of those things where a lot of VIP users are going to use it. And for the sake of a single buff, we're making all of the timers take more space for everyone, regardless of whether or not they're VIP or not, which just feels weird. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is we can make the space where the time goes wider, or we can make the stuff that goes in the space narrower. So what do we have? We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, approximately 8 characters to work with. So my second thought that I had was, why, if something has been around for 4 days and the only thing we know of that example lasts for 14 days, why are we struggling so hard to be precise so that we're seeing the actual seconds of the thing even? And a thought occurred to me that what if we just said, if elapsed, or the equivalent of it, if elapsed time was greater than 360,000, then, and then we need an else if, and then just do self.timer set text about 4 days, whatever, right? So this was possibly the first thing I thought of was, if you've gotten to the point where you have had a buff for multiple days, then it just does not matter how many seconds you've had it, or how many seconds and minutes. Like 4 days and 2 hours, 4 days and 4 hours, it just doesn't matter. And if you get to a thing where it says about 13 days, oh, I have less than a day to go and talk to Wenda again. Cool. Whereas, minutes and hours, seconds and minutes feels more relevant for things that last in the orders of seconds and minutes. But yeah. So this was my next thought is, don't make everything bigger. Keep the timers the same width as they are. Use fewer characters. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters. We can see they're still taking up about as much as 7 characters of time. But what would happen if it was more like about 14 days? In fact, we'll just throw a 44 in there because we've seen that 4 seems to be kind of a wide character here. And when I say that, let's come back to the effect list here. We'll save off these here, these modified values, I'm going to save them into a text file here, so I can just go ahead and revert. I'm going to discard those changes. Ah, 44 doesn't work. But then again, nothing, as we've already said, nothing should ever be 44 days. So let's look at 14 days. "13 days? Oh my goodness. Well, who needs spaces? There we go. You know, I wonder if that tilde is actually competing for longest character. I'm going to go ahead and reload with both a tilde and a 4, and then come on in with a snipping tool. Get that thing out from in front of it. Okay, and let's go back into an MS Paint window. Let's spell MS Paint correctly. Okay, so the tilde itself looks like about 14 characters wide, or pixels wide, whereas the number itself is only about 12. Oh, that is a greedy tilde. Interesting. So I have a background of computer science with, you know, some math and physics and stuff, and I'm really used to seeing the tilde as a symbol that means about or approximately. Is that like a normal thing? Is that what other people would see when they see that tilde 14? Are they saying about 14 days, approximately 14 days? Or is that just like a niche thing that comes out of my educational background and most people are going to look at it and say, what the heck is that squiggly thing doing there? I'm curious. Let me know in the in the chat there, because it's one of those things where I don't want to like inflict this on other people if other people are going to be like, what is that? But if this is like a normal, common thing, I think that would be reasonable. Little Redhead says, to me, a tilde means about. Awesome. That's what we're going for. I wonder if we abbreviated days to D, would that be obvious? I don't like that. Okay. So what I'm seeing is that if we're doing a single digit number of days, say about 7 days, then we can spell it out this way. And it seems to fit just fine in the existing space. As soon as we get into double-digit days, it feels like we might need to kill that space between the number and the days, because otherwise we spill over into a new line. But I think we can do both of these things. So what I'm noticing is that there are format functions, and it makes me cringe. These are being detected every update. We are checking the format, and then we're assigning basically a pointer to the right format function, and then we use that to format the value. In this case, to hours, minutes, seconds. And that feels like a lot of redundant work to be in an update function. Kind of makes me sad, especially because these are settings. So we should be able to use a setting change event to, I don't know, to propagate that change in such a way that we don't need to check it every update. That being said, the display format is being set to numbers. We're grabbing a number, we're comparing it to another number. This is probably not an expensive operation. It just makes me wince a little bit to see that. I like the idea of update functions being as minimalistic as possible. NFL says, and thanks for chiming in, I mean, you could also try to introduce weeks for greater than 7 days if you came up with a good abbreviation for weeks. I mean, you could do about 1 week, but I feel like that would be too little resolution because days do matter for that. Farathan says, I fear you'll try to rewrite every plugin you look at. So I don't act on a lot of the musings that I do here, but I muse aloud because it's useful for me to kind of walk through my initial reactions to code when I see it, and is this a good reaction? Is this a healthy reaction? Is this an unhealthy reaction? Is it useful reaction? But also, I hope it is mildly useful for anyone who has a desire to write plugins or code in general, to just see the thought process of someone looking at code that they're not familiar with. Because that's kind of what I do in my day job, right? Like, generally, my day job involves looking at code that I haven't looked at in weeks or months, and I have to remember how it works or learn it for the first time if someone else wrote it. And part of that process is there something fundamental about how this is written that makes me sad inside, right? Because if there is, if I'm going to be changing the code in some way, is now a good time to kind of revisit some of those early cruftinesses that stuck in the design that don't need to be there. Marathon says, I think days and hours are enough to differentiate. Yeah, and I'm not even sure about hours for something in this. Like, if I've been there for 12 and a half days or 12 and 3/4 days, there's no fundamental difference for this, especially for something that's so easy to re-up as talking to your friendly neighborhood Wenda to just reset that time. Okay, so we are getting a formatting function. And we're gonna, this is a great example of flexibility of Lua. We have a variable. We are assigning that variable to one of 3 possible functions. And then we are activating that variable as if it was a function, which it is, by calling it out with parentheses and calling it like a function. And so we can see the clock format is probably the one that's getting us into trouble. I think I saw that before. We are doing, clock. Not truncated. I'm a little curious about truncated now. Oh, that's neat. What does that look like? What does that look like for really long stuff? Unload, reload. All right, come back in. All right, 69.7 hours. So here's the other problem with really big numbers is we've said it, I think, twice now on this stream. How many hours does it take for subscriber buffs to elapse? Answers in the comments. I mean, like, I do not remember what 14 times 24 is. I think it's around 330. All right, 14 times 24, 336. I feel pretty good about that. But to look at a number like 70 hours and to be like, oh, okay, how many hours do I have left? A lot. Right? The answer is a lot. You have plenty of hours left. Arthur says, welcome to the life of a programmer, the urge to change things. Absolutely. Farthen says, yeah, okay. More than 24 hours, resolved to days, below that hours, minutes. Yeah, I got you. So that's very interesting. The truncated, which is like 1.6 hours, whatever. Literal is interesting. That's just number of seconds. I am not going to comment on that other than to say I don't think that would work for me. Okay, so we have subscriber buffs here. Great. So that means we have a formatting function for clock. Let me go ahead and get our time back here. So it'd be useful to step into the clock function, which looks like it's a utils.timeformat.clock. And there's something going on here because the Lua parser isn't finding that. So if we find .clock, okay, we know you're looking for something in utils, and only misc.lua has utils. Okay, cool. And we have a time format.clock, which takes a value, which looks like it's a value in seconds. Oh, okay. And this is where if it's longer than an hour, then we do hour, minute, seconds. Otherwise, if it's longer than a minute, we do minute, seconds. Other, Otherwise, we just format the seconds. Interesting. All right. Cool. I don't understand why they're bothered to differentiate here. Those last two cases seem pretty identical. But we could have our own case that says if value is greater than or equal to something, then, and then else if. So at this point, we just have to remind ourselves, okay, we're looking for anything that takes 3 digits in hours, and in seconds that's going to be 3600. Now, if this function weren't going to be used multiple times a second, I'd be tempted to spell it out, right? I'd be tempted to say 100 times 60 times 60. But because I'm not sure how the Lua parser is going to handle that, will it just inline that as a constant, or will it try to evaluate that over and over? This is going to be called multiple times a second. I don't want to take that risk. So what I would instead do is say 100 hours times, in seconds. Super easy, right? And then here we can go ahead and say value equals, I don't know, quite some symbols just to make sure we're in the right spot. Great, we can see we're in the right spot. Our symbols have come through loud and clear, as it were, and we can come on back in here and actually do the thing that we're talking about. So we know that we wanted that to be approximately number days. And we can do a string : format on that in value divided by 24. We could be wrong about that. Cool. That was seconds, so we actually divide by 60 to get to minutes, and then 60 to get to hours, and then 24 to get to days. Let's try that. Awesome. So we can see about 7 days. Oh, Krula says BuffBars has this bug that has annoyed me for years. When you hide the Electro UI, F12, for example, take a screenshot, the effect slider countdown timer is not hidden. Now, what I think you are talking about is the horizontal stripe. Can I activate that? Yeah. No. How do I activate that? I know I've seen it being activated. I know minstrels have an ability to activate that because I see it and then I'm like, oh. All right, what is that? Effect sliders. Okay, should be BuffBars, and there it is. So it should be showing up right there. All debuffs, all buffs. Yeah. I might have to go through all my skills to figure out how do I get that thing. Shows up for you with default slider options. Yeah, I just need a thing that makes it happen. Enabled load for store slider has effects. Where did I see that? I saw that in the. Oh, I saw that in the fighting in the beer brawl. But surely there's another way to get it, right? Thought disabling the main window might make it show up, but... All right. Disable, enable. Is there something I can consume that would do that? Try the anthems. Oh, the anthems. What a great idea. Oh! That's exciting. Okay. Oh, that's funny. They're not visible right now. Why would they be visible when unlocked like this, but then the buff bar goes away? That is exciting. Chromite says, that might be one of the fixes that I did. Yeah, that's why I was trying to just recreate the bar showing up. Okay. Okay, well this is very peculiar. It's only showing up for me when I turn moving on. And otherwise it is not showing up. And that doesn't seem normal at all. What's going on here? Options, effect sliders, enabled. I swear we haven't done anything to affect this. Effect. Let's see. Slider. Oh, interesting. Well, Chrome might suggest disabling it, hit apply. Actually, what I'm wondering is... if I do that with the screen visibility updated. Yeah, when I hit disabled, accept, and then enabled, and accept, what if I just revert the thing, or defaults? That is so weird. Well, tell you what, we can come on in here and say, okay, if it's not locked, then unlock. Oh, update it. Update visibility. Let's take a look at that. Cool. Self set visible true. Return. In this case, we're just going to bypass all the calculations to figure out if the bar should be visible or not, and make it visible. Nope, we're not. I guess that wasn't a legal thing. But what I can do is just cut that out. Farathanol says, I'll log in and test it. Well, that's very kind of you. I don't know why it's doing that, because normally I do not see it like that. Okay, so when it's visible, that's fine. Okay, hidden visible is false. If it's not locked, then visible is true. Sure. Then we see, oh, maybe it's because I'm not in combat. Maybe it just doesn't care if I'm not in combat. Is that possible? Maybe. Let's see if it has effects, On mount, camera mount, not mounted. All right, what happens if I mount it? Oh, okay. That is excitingly weird. So we're going to go ahead and put a pin in that. So other thing I would say, thank you, Krulos, for getting me off on a side tangent. One of the things that I have done in the past was release a patch for a patch. So BuffBars, there is a patch for this called the MAJ Update 2017. And that had some issues. That came out about 4 years ago. And I think it was Chromite inspired me to go ahead and fix some stuff in it. So I released the MJ Update 2017 patch fixes. Specifically, when you saved and changed the effect windows, there were non-interactable copies that were being created, and those persisted until you unloaded the plugin and loaded it back in. And the effects windows wouldn't hide when you press F12. And then and some other stuff, it looks like. And so that was causing a problem with people would go ahead and save changes to their buff windows, and then a copy would hang around that would not respect the F12 key. And so what would often happen is if they'd make a change and save, and it would just appear in the same place as the real one. And so you'd press F12, and only the real one would hide. The fake one, which is in the same place, would not hide, and that would just make people think it wasn't respecting F12. Mostly true. And so I never did anything about the slider that I remember, but Fairland says it disappears when you hit F12. It was fixed by V4. Great. That's lovely to hear. Go me from 6 months ago. So give it a try, or maybe wait until after tonight's stream, where hopefully I'll have uploaded an improved version. But give a try of the BuffBars MJ update. What does MAJ stand for? I think I figured this out at one point. I'll go ahead and upload that hopefully on stream, but then you can download it with both the fix for days and all those other fixes as well. It says, Past before is a clever guy. Well, thank you very much. Kula says, sorry, no, don't worry about it. I enjoy tangents. I enjoy going off into fun directions and fun explorations. I just get frustrated when I can't make the plugin do what I think it's supposed to do. I get so excited I drink water down the wrong pipe. Okay, so let's go back to our source control utility and figure out what have we done. Okay, so we have a couple things. We've updated our miscellaneous to give us a day's abbreviation, and we still have our test code. Excellent. Okay, so let's go ahead and update our test code so that make sure we try this out with the longest day that we can think of, 13 days. Although, if you haven't talked to Winda in 13 days, she misses you and wishes you would call. Okay, so that is an effect item. We're going to go ahead and say local 13 day, days 13 equals 13 times 24 times 60 times 60. That sound reasonable? And then we're going to say elapsed time equals days 13. All right, let's give that a try. Let's see. I think we're going to see what we saw before, which was days won't be as big. Also, when I did that reset, it looks like the font size went down. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and bring that back up for wow, when I hit revert, I was expecting it to revert the effect sliders. I did not take note that it was really just going to be everything. Just revert the whole thing. So I guess watch out for that. Okay, we're going to bring that width back a little bit because I like demonstrating the emboldening tier wraparound. Okay, here we're going to go ahead and unload. We're going to go ahead and reload. And we can see the 13 days is wrapping. Chromite says, I think I chatted with Past Before once or twice. Cool guy. Well, thank you. Past Before was pretty cool. I can only hope I live up to and exceed Past Before's everything. Okay, let's come on into the miscellaneous.lua, misc.lua, and check this out. So we know if something is, if value is bigger than something, then that is 10 days in seconds. That's what we want. Fairthon says, pro tip, change one of your free places in the lower right icon bar to the plugin manager. You don't have to go through the main menu every time. This is an excellent tip. So for pedagogical reasons, I like being able to show that on the caret menu under system, there is a plugin manager entry. And so this is more of a, just in case you're tuning in for the very first time, it's not a mystery how I'm getting to it. Because the default configuration for people is not to have a button for the plugin manager conveniently available. That being said, this is an absolutely excellent thing to do. Please note, just like Falafron says, these buttons down here are configurable. If you go into, where is it? Is it quick slots or UI? UI. If you go to your options UI settings, the toolbar left and right slots can be remapped to a wide variety of options, including but not limited to the plugin manager. So thank you very much for pointing that out. Also, there is a key mapping for the plugin manager. And if you like getting into the plugin manager a lot, you can even set a key mapping. You don't even need to click a button to get in there. In fact, Fiber Jedi was posting, if you don't know Fiber Jedi, they post lots of guides and articles, walkthroughs, etc. for Lord of the Rings Online. And they were doing a plugins, thank you for that. There's a link to Fiber Jedi's website. So Fiber Jedi was doing a guide to plugins or their favorite plugins or something like that. And they mentioned, oh, by the way, you can press Control, let's just say it was Control P to get to your plugins manager. And I was like, wait a second. Because I don't believe that is bound by default, but what I do believe is they bound it to that key so long ago that they forgot it wasn't an inherent part of the game, that you actually had to go in and do it. So you can totally go into your plugin, your key mappings and assign a key binding to your plugin manager, or you can go into your UI settings and remap any of these buttons down here. So for instance, if you just never use the button down here to open the deed log, that's okay. You can instead open the plugin manager. But because I want, for similar reasons, you'll see people like Durance Fire or Cordovan streaming with very few plugins because they want people to see the kind of the default experience. I am opening it up with the caret menu because I want people to see that this is accessible in an intuitive way. You can also just type /plugins space manager, right? Like if I just do /plugins space manager, you can't see it unfortunately, but it also opens up this window. So there we go. And you could actually bind that as an alias to one of your quick slots. Like there's 4 different ways to open up the plugins manager. So thank you, Fairthon, for pointing out that I am using only one of many methods to open the plugin manager. That being said, we want 10 days, and that is in 240 hours, which is 14,000 minutes, which is 864,000 seconds. Cool. So if it is more than 10 days in seconds, we'll go ahead and do a value equals approximately %d days format, value divided by 60, divided by 60, divided by 24. Super easy. And that gives us a way to, if you've let your window go on far too long, she misses you, then we'll go ahead and display it. Nope, I've done an error. What do we have here? I forgot to convert the second into an else if, and that is a syntax error. So the file would not even load. Here we go. So if you've let your window go on past the 9-day point to the 10-day point, then you obviously are an anarchist looking for the world to burn down, and the lack of a space between 13 and days should be of no consequence to you. It'll just blend right into your personality. That's what I'm going to go with. So I like this solution better for two reasons. One, if I look at a number like 243 hours, that's just not useful to me. I'm not used to thinking about a matter of weeks in terms of hours. And so seeing 243 hours doesn't tell me, okay, yeah, but how long do I have? Whereas this tells me, oh, sometime in the next 24 hours, and if I need to know specifically, I can just hover over the thing. Oh, I have however long left. But this tells me, okay, it's almost time to go see window. And I think that's a more useful thing for such a long cooldown. Plus, notice that we didn't have to make the entire column of timers wider for this solution. And we could kind of check our assumptions by going through each of the font sizes and making sure this still looks good. But that's sort of the key for me, is that we didn't have to spend a whole bunch of pixels on a whole column of timers, none of which will ever be as long as this one common VIP subscribers buff. And this feels like a better solution for both for readability and for space usage. Now, we could definitely have pros and cons about whether the tilde approach is useful or whatnot, but for me, this is better. Even if it's not best, it's better. And you know what they say, perfect is the enemy of good. Okay, none of those wrap. That is lovely. So if we come in here and say, instead of 13 days, we go ahead and do whatever that was, 100 hours. We'll go ahead and unload, reload, and now we're back to 7 days. Great. All right, so I'm just going to step through those fonts and make sure this all looks pretty good. Now, with only one digit there, I didn't have any worries, because we're just swapping a space for a digit, and that is a similar usage of pixels. But it's a good idea just to go ahead and double check, and I'm satisfied with that. Okay, so we have a solution that doesn't take up any extra space and is hopefully more readable, and that's the one I would ship with. NFL says you could also try if greater than 13 days takes up less space than approximately 13 days. And not programming people are fine with different characters. That's an interesting point. The tilde is a very wide character. We could do greater than. The only reason I didn't do greater than is I have seen a non-zero number of people in life get tripped up between the difference between a greater than and less than signs, which one means which. And if you're not a mathy kind of person, and it's been a long time since you've seen algebra in school, I didn't want to trip up a person who doesn't, like, we're not solving an equation here. It doesn't really matter if it's greater than or about or less than. It's just somewhere in the realm of 13 days. And so I don't know if that's a reasonable thing, but that was just sort of, we're really just talking about, about. So, Chromite says, people get tripped up over the proper pronunciation of GIF too. I know, it's weird. 13 plus days, says Egg Arthur. Yeah. Yeah, for me, when I see 13 plus days, I read that as 13 or more. And it would be true for here as well. Little Redhead types out sort of the canonical American way of learning it. The mouth of the crocodile, and the crocodile wants to eat the bigger number. Which, yeah, I mean, if you're not looking at these symbols on a regular basis, that it's, we need mnemonics to remember this, right? So that's why I went with the tilde. The good news is this is a one character change, so anyone can make it be whatever they want it to be. Like, you just go into MISC, and ooh, I wonder if I'm gonna go search in another window. I am almost certain that this won't render properly, but just in case, let's go ahead and do an interrobang. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that didn't work. Amusingly, it did render as a question mark. So if we had a greater than, what would that look like? All right, greater than 7 days. That feels so ambiguous to me, right? Like, literally all time that is more than 7 days is greater than 7 days. Like, that covers 8 days and also the heat death of the universe, which feels like kind of a wide margin of error. What do we have? We have plus. All right, let's take a look at that. 7+ days. I mean, for me, that's the exact same mnemonic or semantics as greater than. It says yes, but it's accurate. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, all of time is greater than 7 days. All right. What about +7? What does that look like? +7 days. Ah, I like that. Less than 7+ days. All right. I'll go back to look at that. Yeah, for me, 7+ and greater than 7, or maybe technically greater than or equal to 7, are semantically the same and both broadly ambiguous. That's technically correct. The best kind of correct. Yes. Thank you, Futurama. Yeah. I mean, in the same vein that naming things is hard, coming up with meaningful symbols that people are going to get is something. I think I'll just keep it as a tilde. It works for me, and that is, that's kind of the most important thing when it comes to little changes like this, right? Like something that if I look at it in another 6 months, I'll be like, oh, that's what I was trying to do. But if you get this plugin and you're like, oh man, I hate that one thing, come into misc.lua. It's going to be in the time format.clock named function, or the variable that is a anonymous function. And you can just change it to whatever you want. It'll just be a tilde. In fact, I don't think this is a good idea, but you could local approximate time symbol. Like you could do something like this and define define that to be tilde, right? And then you could just use this in the string formatting. I don't want to do that because I don't want the overhead, but you could do that. Like you could actually have an option in options of how do you want this to be. If that was like a really popular feature that thousands of people were like, oh man, I really want to control that. Sure, like that's something you could do. That's not a today problem. Cool. Okay, so we have a fix. I think this is the right fix. I think this is what I'm going to ship. We have tested it in both single and double digit. So I'll pull that back up while I'm using here at the very end. Okay, works for double digits. And we're not using any more of the horizontal space, and it's good enough, right? Musings on the design are done. So go ahead and close down some of these extra windows here. Okay, so let's go over to our source control and figure out what things we need to keep and what things were just debug functions. Okay, setting the background of the timer to purple, that was just a helpful visual for how much space we were using or not using. So we're going to get rid of that. All right, a helper function to give us an arbitrary amount of time because I foolishly re-got my VIP subscriber bus 5 days ago. So we can go ahead and get rid of that. that leaves us with misc.lua. Neat. Okay. Yeah, I'm still not sure about the plugin compendium thing. I'm going to kill that for right now. Okay, so all we have is a change to the time format .clock function. And what does this change do? And in case you're not used to the top-bottom view, you can also just use the comparison tool of your choice. I like Beyond Compare to do a side-by-side left-to-right comparison. You can actually do that in a lot of tools as well. So if I was to do a side-by-side diff, I could do that like this. So Beyond Compare, we can see instead of starting at 3600, more than an hour or more, we're going to start at 100 hours and also 10 days. Lunar Water says, hello, oh, hello, Lunar Water. Welcome to most of the end of the stream where we have made a change to misc.lua in BuffBars for what happens if you have a buff for longer than however. Lunar Water says, nice haircut. It's true, I cut several of them. Thank you. My approach to hair has nothing to do with fashion and everything to do with how annoying it is to me. And the prime characteristic for how annoying the hair on my head is how noticeable is it that I've slept on it and not showered. And as that bar goes up, the amount of time remaining before my haircut goes down. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about doing a release. Now, we've done this before, but it's been a little while. So we have a folder somewhere. Let's go over to Documents and Plugin Along Releases. Great. Now we have a BuffBars version 2113. We're going to go ahead and just copy that over to 2114. That'll give us a starting point. And I'm going to position that on the right because that's my destination. In that is Penguros plugins. And over on the left here, we're going to go ahead and go into Lord of the Rings Online, plugins, and we're going to go ahead and see what is different. And ideally, the answer is going to be very little. And Garth says, I need a slider for that haircut timer. I could write a plugin for it. Every 14 days, I could just be like, get a haircut, or however long. Actually, I could probably just use Thorolor's Reminders plugin, which is very handy. And I could just have a little 21-day reminder in game. Get a haircut. All right, let's go ahead and come on in. We want to show differences. We'll just start with differences. Oh, okay. So previously, if I just show no orphans, we can see these files are the same. So I had not previously done anything in the MISC ones. Frethlin says integrated into BuffBars or minstrel buffs. That's right. If minstrel buffs and character name equals affidil, then we'll just have this whole subsection for maintenance. All right. If we show differences but no orphans, there are none. If we show orphans, we're going to get all of them, right? So if we just show differences, we can come on in here to utils and go ahead and copy over MISC. And now there is a utils and a MISC. Great. Okay, now I do not remember in the downloads folder, was there a .plugin file? I think the answer would be no. Oops, sorry, I should be in downloads. I thought that was not a good idea, but let's come in and check. All right, Penguros plugins, and we have just the BuffBars.plugin. All right, is there anything in there about a patch? That opened up on a different screen. Let's come back over here. Penguros plugin. plugins. Excellent. So we're going to come on into buffbars.plugin. This is 211.3 or even 4, isn't it? What do we have in the plugin manager? 2112, 2114. All right, excellent. There's a BuffBars plugin compendium, 2114. I'm afraid that might not work very well. Because of, I don't know how patches work with, oh, hey, Lunarwater, you're present. I had a question. Because of history, if you're still present, I'll just spell it out either way. Backing away slowly. Excellent. So BuffBars existed, and then someone put out a patch called BuffBars MAJ/update 2017, where they made some changes to it. And some of those changes were correct, and some of them were not correct. But it seemed like a lot of people were using it. I think. Let's see. Yeah, like 13,000 downloads. So not nothing. Later, Fairthen. And then I wanted to put out a patch that fixed some issues in that patch, and possibly just issues in BuffBars as well, like a replacement patch. And so my curiosity is, can there be a thing in Lotra plugin compendium where if we say buffbar, don't hide installed, could patches exist where you could go ahead and install buffbar and then install the patch and then install the patch to the patch through Lotra plugin compendium? Is that a thing that would not be terrible? Minowata says it installs them in the wrong order at present. Oh, Fairthen meant Minowata, yes. Because that would be, okay, it's possible, not at the moment. Okay. Because that is a downside with this patch, right? Because it's a patch on a plugin, my instructions are ridiculous, right? Like if you come in here, it's like, first install BuffBars, and then install this other patch, and now you can install this patch. Which feels rough. I don't know how the average user feels about it. It's not like this thing's being updated all the time, but still. And then Fairthen was asking, oh, why don't I just take it over? And I gave that answer at the beginning. It was basically like, well, this is a plugin with, or the original was a plugin with, 2/3 of a million downloads. And that feels a little abrupt for someone like me to take it over when I don't even use the thing most of the time. Right? Like someone who is a plugin developer and also actively uses BuffBars would be way better for that. But until someone does, we have that, and we have a patch, and we have a patch and a patch. And it's just like, this feels inconvenient. Okay, that being said, let's go ahead and check on these differences here. All right, so I don't think it was useful having a patch or a plugin compendium file. But I'm curious what that would look like. So let me copy over the patch file and see. Huh, I don't know why that was there. I'm going to go ahead and say no to both of those and hope that's not the wrong decision. Okay, so we have all the changes from before. We also have our new MISC changes. That sounds great. Now, a thing that I do that I recommend is preparing your website posts if you're doing any of that. I'm not sure I actually did that here. Oh, good, I did. I just stick them in a folder I call them website because it's stuff that goes on the website. Cool. So let's come on in and prepare our 2114 version. That opened up on a different screen. Let me bring that back here. Okay, And this patch fixes issues with BuffBars, blah, blah. It also changes the display for long-running buffs like VIP subscriber buffs, subscriber buffs. Is the clock display for long-running buffs from, let's see, 302, 42, 2, and then 302 should be about 13 days. Oh, that is 12 and a half to approximately 12 days. From hour, minute, second to an approximation. Okay. Fixed clock display of long, I should say long-lasting buffs. Makes it sound more medicinal, though. Okay, here's all that. 2.1.1. Okay. Oh, and you know, I had forgotten that I did not save the update here for 2113. So let's get that in here. Okay, so we have today, it is the 5th month, 3rd day, and version 2.1.1.4. Formatted clock formatting for long-lasting buffs. Change to approximation. That is all. Okay, so the real question is this going to work? And to answer that, I think it might be useful to kind of walk through those installation steps. Oh my goodness, I have so many windows. Let me minimize a few windows. To walk through those installation steps and kind of convince ourselves that yes, this is going to work. And so what we're going to do is get a fellowship. Neat. We're going to go into our documents, Lord of the Rings Online, plugins, and we're actually going to slide Penguros plugins aside. Now I have a place for that when I'm streaming. I just go to my documents, plug it along, active plugins, and I just slide that on over. And I do a move because there's a Git repository hosted in there. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and close this. And if you do a copy, that does not doesn't do great things. Oh. Guess I won't be able to move it out of the way. That's disappointing. Okay. New plan. Might be there's a Git repo in the background somewhere with a file open, but we don't actually need that. So I'm going to go ahead and lift all of the plugin files out of here. The Git files themselves aren't. Oh, I wonder if it was the workspace file. Well, that's okay. We're going to go ahead and just close that workspace anyway. Yeah, so we've just moved the files out of here. And now we can go ahead and go through the installation process like normal and kind of convince ourselves that yes, this is definitely going to work. So first up, plugin compendium. Lunawater, this is a great tool. Thank you so much. And we're going to go ahead and add a new plugin, Buff bar. And we're going to go ahead and add. Excellent. Downloaded, extracted, all of that jazz. And then we're going to go ahead and download the MAJ update. Now, it is certainly true that I could have rolled all of the MAJ update into mine. That felt a little presumptuous as well. So we're going to go ahead and download this. Oh, right. Maybe MAJ is French for whatever release that was. That sounds like something that might be true. We're going to come on in to the MAJ, and we're going to go ahead and drag this over. And it has 8 files with the same name, so we're just going to replace those. Great. Give it a second. Awesome. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and use that release folder that we were staging. And we can go ahead and in here, we can refresh, we can load, we can see it works. We're going to unload. And then we can go ahead and copy. Wait a second. Oh, that is not the right one. My mistake. Well, we'll just want to go ahead and reopen Documents, plugging along releases. And we have BuffBars 2114, where we can copy this over. And it says there are 6 files with the same names. We'll go ahead and replace those. And finally, we can refresh in here. Well, that's disappointing. Okay, well, what we're not seeing is, of course, I forgot in my haste which one of these is the correct one. I forgot to include the BuffBars.plugin and plugin compendium updates. I wonder if the plugin compendium update is correct. That's probably not correct. But the BuffBars.plugin, which is where we have the update to 2114, that should have been a part of that, and that would have come on in to here. Okay, and if that's the case, when we refresh, we would have seen the 2114. Okay, that was a good catch. And if we load it on up, we have a working, seeming, and this is where I kind of regret not having subscriber buffs that are over 100 hours, but such is how it is. We can convince ourselves it's correct by going to utils and go ahead and edit the misc.lua, and around line 170 or so, we can see the new logic is here. Okay, so the patch on a plugin, nonsense that we're dealing with, looks like it'll be fine. That being said, we have our release. I'm going to go ahead and kill the contents of Pengro's plugins because I want to do this same thing. Oops, I should probably unload the plugin. I want to do the same thing once it's actually released and convince myself that I didn't mess something up. So we have BuffBars. We're going to go ahead and create a zip file for that in the same directory. So I'll just copy the name of that folder, come on down here, make a zip file. New. Excellent. And remember, when you put something into the zip file, it has to be that first top level folder inside of plugins. In this case, it's Pengro's plugins. We're going to move that into the zip file. It can't be the contents of that, or else it will not integrate properly with everything else that's there. That is specifically a thing for the Lotra plugin compendium, but It's just good practice. All right, let's go ahead and do an update. So this is the patch fixes. We're going to go ahead and edit this. And while we're at it, I'm going to copy everything that is here and bring it into a new save file because I'd forgotten to save off the changes here. I was in a hurry trying to fix something that was broken. So we're going to come into Documents. We're going to come into Documents, Lord of the Rings Online, Plugins, Pengro's plugins. Oops, those things were moved elsewhere. Documents, plugging along, active stuff, Pengro's plugins, BuffBars, website, all of that. And we're going to go ahead and save that here. And this is just for my personal preference. I like to have a historical record of the things that I put out into the world. There might be something interesting in there, fun little whatevers that 5 or 10 years from now I'll be like, oh, look at that. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and open up the 2114 version and upload it. Or I should say paste it into here. So we can see our 2114 and the updates in the other places as well. Cool. We're going to replace that 2113 with a 2114. We are in plugging along releases. And we're going to do BuffBars 2114. Excellent. Okay. I don't do patches a lot. I usually do plugins. What do we have? Archive, yeah. Manage images. I could attach up to 6 images. I haven't bothered. Maybe that'll be a good idea to do. I'll worry about that later. Okay, update. You selected to update your file. You need to enter a new version number. Did I not? I did not. All right, thank you. Cool. So this is where we're going to go ahead and double check ourselves. So we're going to come back into Lotro Plugin Compendium. We're going to refresh, and it's going to be like, you don't have that. I'm going to add it. Great. I'm going to come into the... Oh, excellent. My submission will be deleted if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they may or may not contact me. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and go back into my interface, but first we're going to get that MNJ update. And in the downloads, just to clear things out here, let's delete the previous download. And we're going to re-download that initial MAJ patch. Excellent. Extract. Okay, so in our Lord of the Rings plugins folder, we have a Pengro's plugins. We're going to go ahead and drag this in. It has 8 files with the same name. We're going to replace those. Excellent. And then now that we're done with that, we're going to go ahead and download. Oh, it's pending. Dun, dun, dun. All right, we're going to pretend to download that by extracting the version here. All right, so we have our downloads directory. We have our BuffBars 214. We're just going to go ahead and extract. And same thing. We're going to go ahead and go into here and drag Pengro's plugins into plugins. And again, we're just testing those steps that we have told other people to do. Excellent. And then finally, we just come on in here. We hit the green arrow to refresh. We still have a 2114. Awesome. And we load this on up. Now, unfortunately, I don't have an immediate way to test this. Wow, so many windows. Let's go ahead and get rid of some of those. I don't have an immediate way to test that, except, of course, by going in and editing the code. So, let's go ahead and do that. This time we'll just use Sublime Text. We're going to go on into Lord of the Rings Online, plugins, Penguins plugins. And in BuffBars, remember we had an effect item, and around line 170, we just wanted to go ahead and say, if self.effect get effect get name equals subscriber buffs, then we'll go ahead and say elapsed time equals elapsed time plus, and again we just want that enough seconds to definitely tip it over into 3-digit territory. We're going to go ahead and unload, reload, and there we have it. Okay. Well, some chat. Lunar Water says, hopes we see some happy little trees and clouds. Well, sure. I think you were speaking more metaphorically, but have some happy little trees. The Redhead points out there's only 9 days left in the festival. Thanks for throwing that festival command into chat there. Happy 15th Lotro anniversary, everyone. If you like festivals, this is one of them. And Imlar says, I like your explanation so far. Well, thank you very much. I know this is a bit of a niche topic. I'm very happy for any and all of you who are here experiencing the kind of under the hood exploration of how plugins work in Lord of the Rings Online. Oh, well, hey, while I'm in here, I might as well go ahead and take a little bit of a snip. Just around that. We can go ahead and save this off. And we can do the same thing. Documents. We can put it in plugin along. Put it in Penguins plugins. And in the website, we're going to go ahead and say something, right? Now we can say Lotro interface.com image, and this is 2114 dot JPEG. Well, let's do PNG. Thank you. PNG. Awesome. And now this will be something we can upload. In fact, maybe do it. Was it still pending? There we go. Now it is possible for me to come on in here and edit this and go ahead and manage an image. Now, when you hit manage image, you get a new window popping up. Don't worry about it. It's perfectly normal. We're going to come on in here and same thing. Go back to that image we just saved. Oops. BuffBars website image. And the caption for the image, another great thing to capture, by the way. So we're going to save this. Again, plugging along. We're going to go ahead and go into Penguins plugins, website, and in this case, it'll be Lotro interface.com image captions.txt. And for this one, oops. And again, this is just a way for me to have a historical record of what the captions were that I used, either for reference or for cribbing off of later. Example of buff that of a long-lasting buff. Cool. And we're going to upload that. Now we have it here in this window. Awesome. We can close this window. When in doubt, we can always hit manage image and it pops back up. We can see the images there. Awesome. At this point, we can go ahead and hit update. Since the only thing we're changing is text and or images, it's not really a republishing of the plugin, so it doesn't need more review. And here we can have an image for our plugin, finally. It's only been 6 months. Okay, so if you are inclined to not have a subscribers buff listing out duration into the hundreds of hours, consider downloading this patch to a plugin and let me know how that works out for you. Cool. I feel like there was going to be something else. I'm going to have to clean up my folders that have gone everywhere, but that's a me problem, not a you problem. Okay, so I think we're rapidly approaching an end of a stream here. Just to recap what we did, we saw that subscriber buffs has a unusually long duration of 14 days. And that meant when you displayed it as hours, minutes, seconds, it ran into 3-digit hours quite easily, comically easily, and the text area space for that wasn't big enough. The text would wrap over to the next line, which was very not great looking and kind of distracting. And so we had two options: either make the column of text widths wider, which affects every column or every effect text, timer text, even though this is the only effect that we know that can last this long, or just change the text. Don't even bother trying to be that precise for something that is lasting in a matter of weeks. And that's the approach I liked better. I didn't want to affect the width of every timer just for this one thing that can last for 14 days. So we went ahead and narrowed down our changes just to a single file and added that to a previously existing patch so that now this patch includes that change and the previous changes as well. And so that's kind of how to update a patch of a plugin to include just a little bit more niceness, a little bit more functionality. I see someone is acquiring finely wrought carrying torches in my fellowship. Excellent. Okay, throw any more questions or concerns you have into chat there. I'm going to have a drink and check over chat myself, and then we will bring this one to a close. I know we ran a little bit late today, but I was very excited to just get this done and out the door so anyone who cared about that particular issue would have a solution. See in chat, Ferrothen says, great stream, looking forward to the next one. Thank you so much. P.S. The update works, of course. Well, you say of course. I tested it twice myself because I have messed up updates in the past. Most recently, I think with, was it Minstrel Buffs? Oh, it might have been Minstrel Buffs, where it's just like, oh, I forgot to include a function, and then anyone who downloaded that version of the patch, it just would not load at all. So I'm trying to be a little bit more cautious about that. Especially when I revisit a patch like this that I haven't touched in months. And I don't have that kind of process in my head of, okay, I do X, Y, and Z. Done. There are some people who use the built-in repositories on Lotro interface. So if you are an aspiring plugin developer, SVN is an older style repository, but my understanding is that there are some built-in options to just immediately publish your plugin update or your patch updates from that SVN repository, so you don't have to quite do this, creating a zip file, uploading it, double checking everything. And also, I think, was it Lunar Water was talking about using Git actions to create the zip file and possibly just create it and download it, start it downloading for you from a repository. So you give it the rules, which files to include all this, and then you just hit go, and then you get a zip file. That sounds really interesting. I haven't played around with that too much, and I probably won't use it for on-stream stuff, just in case you're an old-fashioned person and you just want to do text files and zip files. That's totally fine. But there are some better tools out there that are a little bit more consistent and less human brain dependent, and I think that's great. Well then, the most annoying bug with Minstrel Buffs, the Lotro translators used a hyphen. And of course there's the M dash and the N dash, so don't mistake the two of those or your pattern matching won't work. All right, well, I think that's everything that is in the stream chat. Let's see, all right. Anything else in my notes? We are not the last Tuesday of the month, so we will not have a Shoreless Skies tonight. So that's everything we're going to cover today. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of Lotro plugins. I do hope to see you again next week, and until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.